It's time for the 1430 Connection on 1430 WNAV and 99.9 FM, spotlighting news, newsmakers, and important community issues. Now, with this week's edition of the 1430 Connection, here is WNAV news anchor Donna Cole.
Welcome to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole. I have the pleasure today of talking to Matt Ogburn. He's a biologist at the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center, and he's also the co-author of a study that was just published, along with Robert Semmler. He's a doctoral student at Lancaster University within a few days of finishing up, and congratulations to him. He is the lead author of the study we're going to talk about. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me today.
Hi, Donna. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for giving us the opportunity.
My pleasure. The reason why I want to talk to you is because we are in Chesapeake country and the study is about blue crabs. The study was conducted over the summer months of 2015 and 16, was it not?
That's correct.
And what you looked at was how many blue crabs are caught in the Chesapeake Bay and by which groups, recreational and commercial crabbers. The study is called The Influence of Blue Crab Movement on Mark Recapture Estimates of Recreational Harvest and Exploitation. How did this study come about?
So recreational harvest has been a bit of an unknown for management purposes. It's something that local management agencies have wanted to know and to quantify for sure. So that was something that got funded, was to figure out how we can actually determine the exact size of the recreational fishery, how many crabs are being caught recreationally. And that was something that got funded through Matt's lab as a master's thesis project, and that was how I started. I was a master's thesis student at the University of Maryland doing my research at CERC.
I was a postdoctoral researcher at Smithsonian Environmental Research Center at the time, and was one of the authors of the proposal that funded this work, along with Tuck Hines and a couple of others. And so this built off work that had been going on at CERC for a while. And then when we were funded to do the work, we were able to recruit a graduate student as part of that process. So then we had an application process and selected Robert as the applicant to work on this project.
I love how that worked out, because that's so cool that you're giving a student the ability to forward their studies, their career. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, really great.
The work was funded by the work was funded by Maryland Sea Grant, and funding graduate students to be part of the projects is one of the really important things they do to help build expertise in fisheries research in the region.
I'll read the first sentence of the study abstract. It says, despite the need to quantify total catch to support sustainable fisheries management, estimating harvest of recreational fishers remains a challenge. And before we get into what the study did conclude, and that is going to be good news to, I think, the commercial watermen, crabbers, yes?
Yeah, I think they're going to be pleased.
Let's talk about what you did, what you started with. How did it start? Did you two put out some crab pots at CERC and catch all these crabs, and how many crabs did you use?
So we worked directly with the watermen to get crabs, to tag them and put them in the water. So we worked with several different watermen in different areas of the bay, and we typically have one researcher on the waterman's boat right there with them as they're catching crabs coming off a trot line or out of a pot, then pulling them aside so we can pass them off to a tagging boat where we will put these vinyl plastic tags on their back with our phone number and a reward amount and some information for anyone who catches them to write down, and then we release them into the water as soon as we can.
The large majority of crabs were tagged with a $5 reward, but if I read it correctly, there were some that had $50 rewards.
Yep, and that's a good way for us to figure out the exact amount of crabs that are being caught but maybe not reported because, say, there wasn't enough incentive for the reward.
How many crabs did you end up putting out into the bay?
So we tagged about 7,000 adult male crabs across different areas of the bay, and of those we had about 2,000 that were called in and returned.
And that was just in Maryland, right, that you put out in Maryland, but some did end up in Virginia?
Yeah, some did end up in Virginia. We actually had one crab that made it as far as North Carolina, actually. But yeah,
that's amazing. Did that surprise you?
Yeah, a little bit. It's always interesting how far crabs can move, but that's another aspect of this study is the movement.
This was during the months of June, July, and August?
Yep.
And because I'm so interested, because it's so intriguing to me, the one that was found in North Carolina, was that a female crab?
I'm actually not sure off the top of my head. I have to look, but yeah, I don't actually know, sorry.
And am I wrong to think that it's the females that move down to the lower part of the Chesapeake towards the winter?
Females do make migratory movements, whereas the males will kind of move back and forth between the different tributaries of the bay more so.
Does it matter the size of the crabs in the study? Did that account for any of the conclusions that were drawn?
So we only wanted to tag adult male crabs because what we really wanted to identify is the proportion of the crabs that are illegally caught that are being caught by recreational fishers. So since recreational fishers in Maryland can only catch male crabs as opposed to females, we only tagged males, and we only tagged crabs of legal size.
Was that North Carolina crab the most surprising to you, or was there something else that you found?
That was definitely surprising. I think something that's just interesting from a matter of scale. I think one of the most interesting things about this study is how we've just been able to visualize the different fishing effort across the areas of Maryland. So with our kind of statewide calculations, we can figure out how much recreational harvest is happening in all of the different, they're called harvest reporting areas of the bay. So the Maryland waters of the bay are divided up into 29 different harvest reporting areas. And they can be, say, a single tributary like the Magothy River or a large section of the bay main stem. And so what we find that's interesting is just how much these values can vary in all those different areas. You can have a place like the Severn River where crabs, twice as likely to be caught by a recreational fisher than by a commercial fisher, to areas of the bay main stem where it's almost entirely commercial harvest.
One of the things that I found particularly interesting as well is you were talking about, in the Severn River, there are about twice as many harvested by recreational versus commercial fishermen. One of the other things we did is look at what percentage of male crabs are caught each month in each of the places. And the highest numbers were in the Magothy River and the Wicomico River on the Potomac, where over 2/3 of all of the male crabs that were harvestable size were caught within a period of a month or two. So it just gives you a sense for, in some places, how intensive the blue crab fishery can be, that you put out 100 crabs and people are going to catch 60 or 70 of them within a month or two.
And I'm not sure that's all that great of news for the crabs, but let's take a quick break. We'll be right back on the 1430 Connection. Welcome back to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole. I'm talking to Matt Ogburn and Robert Semmler. Robert was the lead author of it. Matt was the co-author of it on blue crabs, how they move, and who is catching them in the Chesapeake Bay. Robert is getting ready to finish up his PhD at Lancaster University. Matt is at the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center. Let's look at the final numbers here. We in Maryland estimate the recreational blue crab catch currently as what?
Using a kind of a traditional approach, we would have estimated that there are about 4 million crabs caught recreationally. But with our kind of revised estimate that it takes into account crab movements, it's actually about 5.5 million crabs that are caught recreationally.
That's a big difference.
Yeah, and it does seem like a big difference in recreational harvest, but it's actually kind of a small fraction in the context of the total overall harvest, which is about 80 million crabs per year when you count in the commercial fishery as well.
But it's still a considerable difference in size.
Sure.
And I think when I said originally this is going to be good news for the commercial watermen, I believe they've said the recreational catch is underestimated, right?
Yeah, that's been a fear, on their part.
I would just jump in and say, there have been a variety of people who have suggested that over the years, and the guesses at how much it might be underestimated have varied widely, from a little bit to it might be 10 times what it is. I think we found that it's higher, but not as much higher as some people had feared anyway, too, which I think is also a good thing.
Right. The years that you did this, as far as my research go, were considered pretty good years in the blue crab world in Maryland. Am I correct?
Yeah, I think so. 2014 was a bit of a rough year.
Right, but 15 and 16?
Yes.
They were better years. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 2014 was definitely down, and then they started to pop back up in 2015, 16, and then they go up and down depending on the weather. Sure. Mostly, right?
Yeah, there's a variety of factors. The weather was definitely a factor, I think, in 2014 with some freezes in the overwintering of the crabs.
And these tags are placed on the dorsal shell, the outer shell, right? Top shell of the crab.
Mm-hmm.
Do they prevent mating? Do they prevent migrate? Obviously, the one that ended up in North Carolina didn't seem to mind it too much. They don't have any impact on the crab's movement?
No, we don't think
so.
I mean, maybe very minimal, but they're attached on the two long spines that are on the left and right side of the crab that are called the lateral spine, and then just rest on the back, so it doesn't prevent the crabs from feeding or burying in the sediment or swimming or running away from predators or things. So we think they have a pretty minimal impact, and they're also really easy to see if you catch the crab.
And apparently the numbers of return crabs was higher than in the past with similar studies. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I think there were previous studies that the lab has done over the years, some on female crabs and some on other groups. And this has been a little bit of a higher reporting fraction than previous studies.
What do you attribute that to? The $50?
Well, no, I think we use the same rewards for all the different studies, but I think part of that may have been communication with the watermen and with the local populations to ensure people are reporting. And I think one of the things that we see is that there is a higher reporting rate in one of the years, I forget, in the first year where we're tagging areas that we have tagged crabs in previously, so we already kind of have a close working relationship with the fishers in that area. So we see higher reporting rates in areas where we have previously worked with the fishers in that location.
Matt, you have anything to add? Because I'm sure you've seen some of these studies in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's differed, but I suspect in part we've gotten a lot more crabs reported in this study because we were working on males, and there was a lot of interest in whether there might be a need for more management of males at the time, and so there was, I think, a lot of attention on the work that we were doing, which was great.
All right, let's take another quick break. We'll be right back on the 1430 Connection. Welcome back to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole, talking today to Matt Ogburn and Robert Semmler. They have recently published a study on blue crabs. It's called The Influence of Blue Crab Movement on Mark Recapture Estimates of Recreational Harvest and Exploitation. Robert, is this the first study you've published?
This is one of a couple studies I published. I had another paper. I kind of split my roles a little bit while I was at the University of Maryland because I have a passion for kind of management and ensuring fisheries are stable and healthy in the future, and that kind of got pushed into this project, but I also have a passion for coral reef science. So while I was at the University of Maryland, I got to publish a study where I was looking into the diversity of deep water coral reef ecosystems. So that's published as well.
Which is now while you're heading to Texas to be near coral reefs. Where are you from originally?
So I'm originally from western New York State, Rochester, New York.
Where you don't see a lot of blue crabs swimming around.
No. I've steadily increased in salinity as my career has gone along, I think.
And have you developed a love for our local delicacy here? Did you eat any?
Absolutely.
Okay.
No, I had never eaten any blue crabs before I got here, and I've definitely come to appreciate it. And I've also come to appreciate them just from a standpoint of I think they're pretty cool and they've got a lot of personality. They're very feisty.
They definitely do have a lot of personality, and although they're called beautiful swimmers. But tell me the Latin name.
Calanactes sapidus.
There you go, which translates to beautiful swimmers. Matt, what next? How will this affect the industry or not affect the industry, and how do you communicate this out to those that want to keep an eye on sustaining the population of blue crabs?
That's a great question, and we've actually already been trying to do some of that for the last couple of years since we completed the work. So we presented some of our preliminary results to two different groups that provide advice to Maryland Department of Natural Resources. One is focused more on recreational fishing and one more on commercial fishing. So we presented to those groups and also to the Chesapeake Bay Stock Assessment Committee, which is the group that comes up with the advice for the states, both Maryland and Virginia, and also the Potomac River Fisheries Commission on the best way to approach managing the blue crab population. And so as part of that outreach, and especially now that it's published, we've been recommending that they incorporate our new estimate of recreational fishing in the population model that they run to determine how many crabs are harvested. And we hope that including that will help give us just a better handle on exactly how many crabs are being caught and how sustainable the fishery is. It'll be an improvement in management and an incremental improvement based on new evidence.
I know the size, there are definitely limits. Are there currently limits on the number of blue crabs a recreational crabber can catch?
Yeah, there are some limits that are based on sort of how many you might be able to catch per day or per person on the boat, some things like that. But there's not a limit on the total number that can be caught each year of males, either by commercial fishermen or by recreational fishermen. The way the management sort of works is that there's this population model that estimates how many crabs are going to be out there each summer, and then as the commercial fishery happens, the commercial fishermen report how many they catch of males and females, and then at the end of the year, the state can say, we estimate there were this many out there, and we know this many were caught commercially, and figure out what that percentage is. And so that's how they sort of do management, by making sure not to catch too high a percentage. And for males, there's not currently a percentage that's been used in management, but they've sort of drawn a line that if the percentage of males goes above a certain level, they'll start thinking about male conservation measures. And it was really close in 2017. So if they take our new numbers and rerun the models, we might find that number was actually exceeded in 2017. But the percent of males that's been caught in the 3 years since then has gone down. So we're in a much better place than we were in that year with respect to males.
So I think you said they will start thinking about conservation measures. Are you of the belief that this will be coming in the future?
Well, it depends. Right now, the management measures are based on the numbers of females and the percentage of females that are caught, because female crabs are so key to reproduction. And there's just been concern that there's the possibility that too many males might be harvested. So yeah, the way that it's written is essentially that if that threshold is crossed, the managers will start discussions about what they might, what that means for the population and what the approach might be at that time. Hopefully we won't ever get there, but it's possible we could.
These are not a finite resource.
Correct. Yeah, it's not a finite resource, and we know that because the population, especially of mature females that are reproductive, declined in the late 1990s and stayed at really low levels until 2008. When the fishery was declared an official fishery disaster by the federal government.
Right.
And then at that time, there were management actions put in place to protect more females. And the population came roaring back pretty quickly and has bounced up and down since then, but been much better than it was for that almost 2-decade-long period of low levels. So we think the management that's going on now seems to be doing a pretty good job at having both a pretty healthy crab population most years and also a pretty strong fishery to support both commercial and recreational crabbing.
Well, I can't thank you both enough for the work that you do and will be doing in the future, and for taking the time to talk to me today about it.
Well, thank you for having us.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having us. Yeah.
This is Donna Cole. This is the 1430 Connection. I'm going to take a vacation for about a month, and I will see you thereafter.